Welcome to the Ancient Health Guide podcast, where we take a look back into the fascinating world of ancient healing. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into The Healthy Life, Volume V, a collection of issues numbers 24 through 28 to be exact, originally published in London between July and December of 1913.
And what's fascinating about looking back at this particular moment, the early 20th century, is this interesting blend. You've got, established traditions and emerging scientific ideas kind of running side by side. You have burgeoning advancements in some scientific fields, but also this continuing respect for and maybe reliance on older understandings of what it meant to live a healthy life. It really sets the stage for understanding the perspectives we're going to find in these pages.
Absolutely. And our entry point into this historical perspective comes from an editorial titled simply An Indication. Now, okay, it's just an editorial, but brings up a point about how we approach knowledge, particularly in specialized areas, that I think is, well, incredibly relevant even today.
Yeah, the editorial, it astutely observes that while specialists are essential, for deep understanding within a field, that very focus can sometimes lead to a narrowing of perspective. They can become so immersed in their own area that they might maybe inadvertently overlook broader contexts or even dismiss valid insights from people outside their immediate specialization.
Exactly. The editorial suggests this is where the non-specialist, so someone with maybe a broader view, can actually play a really valuable role. They can compare different specialized viewpoints, perhaps see connections those, deep entrenched in one area might miss, and potentially even help uncover new understandings. It's like having someone step back from a really detailed painting to see the bigger picture.
That's a wonderful analogy. And if we connect this to, the listener navigating the vast and sometimes overwhelming landscape of modern health information, this editorial encourages a really valuable skill. Don't be afraid to look at things from multiple angles.
Right.
Consider different perspectives, even if they seem contradictory at first glance. That's often where a more comprehensive, nuanced understanding of your own health journey can emerge.
There's even this rather strong analogy used in the editorial. It suggests that specialization may lead to madness, just as electricity may lead to death. It's a vivid way of highlighting the potential dangers of an overly narrow or, inflexible mindset, isn't it?
It is a strong statement for the time. While we might not use such dramatic language today, do you think there's maybe a modern equivalent to this concern about hyperspecialization, say in fields like medicine? Perhaps the risk of focusing so intensely on one biomarker that we overlook the holistic well-being of the individual.
That's a really interesting point. It makes you wonder if we, in our own information age with its silos of expertise, sometimes fall into similar traps. The editorial goes on to suggest that specialists should periodically make an effort to understand opposing viewpoints. The idea is to maintain what they call elasticity of brain and potentially gain fresh perspectives on their own work. This feels like timeless advice for anyone trying to grasp complex topics. Actively seeking out and trying to understand different viewpoints can actually strengthen your own understanding and keep your thinking agile.
Absolutely. In a world where we're often encouraged to sort of double down on our beliefs, this editorial from over a century ago reminds us of the value of, intellectual humility and the potential for growth that comes from engaging with different ideas.
So this idea of maintaining an open mind is fascinating. Now, shifting gears a bit from these more abstract concepts, let's look at how this emphasis on resourcefulness and practicality played out in everyday life, starting with an article on camping out.
Camping.
Now, you might think camping is just about escaping to nature, but this piece gets into some wonderfully specific details about the essential gear of the time.
It really does. It paints a picture of a time when self-sufficiency and careful planning were paramount, even for something like camping. The author meticulously describes essential equipment, starting with the frying pan. Interestingly, aluminium was preferred for lightness, but there's a kind of funny warning against using an iron pan if you wanted to bake girdle cakes.
Girdle cakes?
Apparently, culinary success in the wilderness had its specific material requirements.
And the discussion around camp kettles is just as detailed. These were basically nested sets of metal pots designed to fit inside each other for easy transport, almost like Russian dolls, but for cooking.
Yeah. Exactly.
The article describes how to hang them over a fire using tripods made from tied sticks and these S-shaped pot hooks. It's a very practical and, almost ingenious way of managing cooking over an open flame with limited stuff.
What stands out is the clear emphasis on efficiency and making the most of limited space. These nested kettles minimize bulk, and the tripod and pot hook system offers a flexible way to cook multiple items over one fire, allowing for different heat levels. In our modern world of super lightweight, purpose-built camping gear, it's easy to forget the ingenuity required back then.
Then we have the rather strong opinions on ovens. The author firmly dismisses using a biscuit tin as an oven, clearly favoring a more traditional hole-in-the-ground method for baking. It's a fun little peek into the cooking wisdom and available tech, or lack thereof, of the era.
And the section on tableware is equally revealing. There's a strong preference for tin dishes over ceramic plates, mostly because they were deeper and less likely to tip over when you're eating outdoors, often without a proper table.
Makes sense.
And then the tin mugs without saucers. The anecdote about someone named Basil mistaking them for something he saw in poulterer shops adds a delightful touch of humor to what was, really, a very practical consideration.
It really does bring the past to life. You can almost imagine the situation. But again, the underlying focus is on practicality. These tin mugs would nest neatly, saving precious space, and the article even describes the proper way to hold them to avoid burning your hands on hot drinks. It speaks to a level of intentionality in even the simplest actions when you're relying only on what you can carry.
It highlights how even the most basic aspects of daily life were approached with a certain degree of forethought and efficiency when resources were limited. The mention of bone egg spoons and preferring lighter aluminum cutlery further underscores this concern for minimizing weight and maximizing practicality when packing. It makes you appreciate the convenience we often take for granted today.
Moving on to luggage, the article makes a clear distinction, strongly advocating for the rucksack and declaring the knapsack to be, and I quote, obsolete. It emphasizes the importance of a waterproof canvas bag designed to conform comfortably to the back for longer treks.
This suggests an emerging understanding of basic ergonomics, even if the formal science wasn't as developed as it is now. The focus was on distributing weight effectively for greater comfort over longer walks, and the added detail about a hood for extra rain protection shows a real awareness of, the unpredictable weather and the need to protect your stuff.
But the real highlight of this section, for me anyway, is the description of the 5-foot sausage method of packing luggage on a bicycle for longer journeys. Can you even picture this thing?
It's quite a vivid mental image, laying out your ground sheet, blankets, tent, mattress cover, clothes, all your essential gear in a long line, and then meticulously rolling it all up into this substantial sausage-shaped bundle and carefully securing it to the top bar of your bicycle. It's a remarkable testament to the resourcefulness and determination required for travel back then.
And the detailed instructions on how to tie it securely with whipcord and position it so it wouldn't mess with steering it really gives you a sense of the planning and effort involved in what we might now consider a relatively simple bike trip. It's a far cry from just throwing a pannier on your rack.
Absolutely.
This level of detail really underscores how much thought went into adapting to the challenges of travel with the tech they had.
It certainly does. And the specific instruction to push the tent poles through the lashings to keep them secure every bit of space and function was carefully considered. It's a fascinating glimpse into the practical ingenuity of the early 20th century.
All right, let's now turn our attention to another absolutely crucial aspect of healthy living discussed in this volume, diet. We're moving on to an article titled, How Much Should We Eat? A Warning. The editors introduced this piece by noting it comes from a pioneer of modern dietetics, which immediately signals a more scientifically grounded discussion.
Yeah, this article really grapples with the fundamental question of food quantity. The author starts by drawing a contrast between the past, when people mainly ate natural, unprocessed foods, and their appetites were a pretty reliable guide, versus their present 1913, where the rise of processed foods and maybe less healthy appetites made the question of how much to eat far more critical. This resonates with many of the dietary concerns we still grapple with today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The core argument seems to be that with the introduction of unnatural food, the innate cues that once helped us regulate intake might not be trustworthy anymore. So, consciously considering and managing the quantity becomes essential for health. This idea of mindful eating and being aware of portions is definitely still relevant.
What's particularly interesting is the warning about stimulants with flesh foods, meaning meat, presumably given as an example. The suggestion is that these foods can initially lead to overeating, which might then be followed by periods of underfeeding once the stimulating effect wears off, creating an imbalance. It highlights the interconnectedness of different dietary choices and their potential impact on our eating patterns, something we continue to study today in terms of satiety and appetite regulation.
And there's a very strong emphasis in the article on the lack of widespread public knowledge about basic human physiology at the time. The author expresses significant concern about the proliferation of diet quacks individuals without proper scientific training spreading potentially harmful misinformation about nutrition. Sounds eerily familiar, right, with all the stuff online today.
Oh, absolutely. That concern is powerfully illustrated by a rather alarming anecdote. It involved three men, two of them medical professionals, who experienced serious health problems and tragically, in one case, death after following the advice of a layman with no physiological training who advocated for extremely small food intake.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder of the potential dangers of unqualified nutritional advice and the importance of seeking guidance from those with a solid understanding of physiology. This cautionary tale feels particularly pertinent now.
It's a sobering reminder that even well-intentioned advice, if not based on sound scientific principles, can have devastating consequences. So, what were the key conclusions the author drew regarding this crucial question of food quantity?
Well, the author lays out several important points. First, they assert that the quantity of food we consume is absolutely critical for health. Second, they state that trained physiologists had established appropriate guidelines years prior based on scientific understanding, and there was no valid scientific reason to deviate significantly from these recommendations. It really highlights the value they placed on evidence-based approaches.
What specifically were these scientifically established quantities they referred to?
The author mentions a requirement of approximately 9 or 10 grains of proteid per day for each pound of bone and muscle weight. Now, while they use proteid then, we'd largely understand this as protein today. But the specific measurement in grains might not directly translate to our current understanding of grams or percentages without more context on the units back then. Still, it clearly indicates an early attempt to quantify protein needs based on body composition.
That's a very specific metric for the time, yeah. It really underscores the scientific approach they were advocating for.
It does. And the author goes on to warn that consistently consuming significantly more or less than this recommended quantity over time could lead to serious health problems. What's interesting is they note the specific nature of these issues could vary, and the underlying cause, poor nutrition, might often go unrecognized or be blamed on something else. It highlights the complexity of diagnosing nutritional issues.
So, according to this perspective, how could someone tell if they were getting enough food? What were the physiological indicators they suggested looking for?
The author outlines several key things. Normal muscular strength, healthy blood circulation indicated by good skin color and warmth, and proper mental function. They suggest that any significant persistent drop in these areas should be a warning sign that nutrition might be inadequate. These are still generally recognized today as important markers of overall well-being.
The article even touches upon the idea of actually measuring food intake and waste products to get a more precise understanding of nutrient utilization. That sounds like a rather involved process for the average person in 1913, doesn't it?
It does, but it emphasizes the level of scientific rigor they believed was needed. There's even a brief case study of a man experiencing increasing weakness and dyspepsia, that old term for general digestive trouble, who actually recovered by significantly increasing his food intake and gaining weight. It turned out his symptoms were actually due to severe undernourishment.
That's a powerful illustration of how easily the signs of underfeeding can be misinterpreted. And the author also makes the important point that weight loss isn't always the first sign. They suggest some individuals might even gain weight on a diet deficient in essential proteins, further complicating things.
Exactly. It challenges the simple idea that weight is the sole indicator of nutritional status.
Yeah.
This is why the author stresses that careful attention to food quantity, especially protein, was crucial for those not eating solely natural foods. They advocate for considering nutrition as a potential factor in every illness, not just those obviously linked to diet.
The advice to listeners back then is quite direct. If you have concerns about how much to eat, consult a trained physiologist, someone with scientific understanding, not these diet quacks. That distinction between qualified experts and misinformation peddlers is still so crucial today.
And for day-to-day self-monitoring, the author recommends paying close attention to those physiological indicators: muscle strength, endurance, energy levels, skin circulation and temperature, even blood color, like checking for pallor. These can be important early warning signs.
It's also a valuable point that our own perception of how much we eat can be inaccurate. We might feel like we're eating a lot or very little, but objective markers or tracking can give a clearer picture. Ultimately, the author suggests the ideal quantity is whatever amount achieves those healthy physiological results consistently.
And the author concludes by contrasting the potential consequences of overeating, which they suggest are generally less severe, with the potentially deadly dangers of prolonged underfeeding, especially when the symptoms are misunderstood. It's a powerful warning about the fundamental importance of adequate nutrition.
This deep dive into these early 20th century perspectives has been truly enlightening. From the editorial pushing for intellectual flexibility, to the detailed camping advice and the scientifically informed warnings about food quantity, it's clear many fundamental questions about health were being thoughtfully considered even then.
Hmm.
And it's striking how some concerns, like critical thinking about health info and the need for balanced nutrition, still resonate so strongly.
What's particularly insightful is seeing how these historical perspectives, rooted in the science of their time, often touch upon timeless health principles. It encourages us to look beyond the latest trends and consider the enduring wisdom in these earlier explorations of healthy living.
Indeed. And that brings us to our final thought for you, our listener. Considering these early 20th century insights, the value of diverse perspectives, the practicalities of living well with less, the fundamental need for adequate nutrition is understood, then what connections can you draw to your own approach to health today? Are there perhaps lessons from the past that could offer new perspectives on our modern challenges? Definitely something to consider.